California banned certain teams from competing, and certain coaches are not too happy. Now, it's not necessarily wild for California to ban certain things, as we've seen before, but this time they're maybe stepping a boundary as it goes into sports. So what's going on here? What did they ban? Why are they banning schools from competing? What's going on? So this is actually old news that has since resurfaced back from 2018, and it's really because it's resurfacing because it's coming into fruition during the 2019-2020 season. Now, it's from an article posted in the LA Times. I'll link to that article down in the description so you can read it. They are banning, during the 2019-2020 school year, California from the CIF, the California Interscholastic Federation, is banning schools from playing schools around the country that don't compete in their state championship playoffs. So take that in for a second. I'll read that again. They're banning schools from playing schools or wrestling schools from around the country that don't compete in their own playoffs. So if you're a team from California, you cannot now play against, or like in football, you can't now play against a team from Colorado or Pennsylvania or Idaho. And in football, maybe that's not that big of a deal because for the most part, you're playing teams within your state. But what about for wrestling? That's where we get into this. So, to be honest, there wasn't that much information on this, which I found very surprising. So I'm going to get into the information that I found, that I had, and I want you to, if you're a California wrestler, I want to hear your opinions on this because this is very big news, and maybe you have a little bit more inside information than I do. So currently California competes against everybody in the state, in their state championship. Everybody in the state is just one division, just everybody goes in, and really that makes for a heck of a tough state tournament. Now, I think the thing that this article stated, and the thing that California is looking out for, is they really want to look at what playing high school sports means and what the ultimate goal and the morals behind that should be. Should high school sports be about winning, or should they be about having a good time, competing with your local teams? Okay, listen, I see both sides. I see that maybe there's too much pressure on high school teams, on high school kids to compete. 100% get that. However, to ban schools from competing against other schools just because they're from a different state. Now, I get not allowing these teams to compete in the state tournament. Like in Pennsylvania, I talked a little bit about in a separate video. There were certain religious schools that are allowed to compete in the PIAA, even though they are technically allowed to recruit, but they're allowed to compete in the PIAA tournament. Now, if you're a prep school, you can't. You have to compete at national preps, like a Wyoming Seminary or a Blair, which we will get into those coaches, what they had to say. Now, the biggest thing that the board too is looking for is they don't think it's fair. They don't think it's fair for these schools to compete against each other. Now, the biggest person who has really brought this back up is Coach Green at Wyoming Seminary, head coach at Wyoming Seminary. He's fully against this. He put out a tweet storm talking a little bit about this. I mean, nothing bad. He was just putting out his opinion. He said this: Wyoming Seminary has been educating students since 1844. California became a state in 1850. The idea that the CIF would prohibit its athletes from competing against ours because they are concerned about our academic profile is a little bit difficult for me to grasp. The National Prep Tourney was first contested in 1935. It's older than the PIAA, which is the Pennsylvania State Tournament, older than the NYSPHSA, the New York State Tournament, older than nearly every state association championship. Preventing your athletes from competing against kids who compete in an event with such history and prestige seems very odd. And I'll be honest, I don't know exactly how many schools Wyoming Seminary is competing against in California, but if a school in California wants to have a dual meet or dual match with Wyoming Seminary, why shouldn't they be allowed to? And that's what's interesting. I don't know how this flows over into wrestling. Are California schools, they're not allowed to compete against other schools. Are they allowed to go to national tournaments, or do they just have to stay in California? Can they only now compete at California tournaments, opens and things like that? Or are they allowed to go to Ironman and Beast of the East and Powerade and Reno Tournament Champions, which is the closest tournament to a lot of these kids, is Reno? Are they not allowed to compete against them now? I would have to say I would doubt it, but there hasn't been much clarification on it. And that's why I'd like to really know what the deal is with that. And I understand where Coach Green's coming from with saying a lot of this, that, why should we not be allowed to compete against a school if we want to? They should be allowed. A lot of these high schools are looking to wrestle the best teams in the country so they can see how they stack up against them. They can get that better competition, and really so they can get recruited and see, if there's a big match between Wyoming Seminary and a school from California, they should be allowed to wrestle. To me, that's plain and simple. Maybe I'm looking into this wrong, but to me, that's how I interpret it, and that's how I saw things. We'll see how it turns out in the 2019-2020 season. But to me, this is just absolutely crazy. It could be bad for scholarship opportunities for these guys who can't now compete in these tournaments. But like I said, please, if you're from California, let me know in the comments below. I'd like to have a big discussion about this and talk all about that.